We have a basic press release for y'all, and as you can see, today, Michael Maven, agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, took 3 warrants for the arrest of Marcus Lillard. He took a warrant for them for murder, and it's going to be by strangulation, concealing a death, and aggravated assault. These warrants were signed by Judge Trammell today at the Baldwin County Courthouse, and our defendant, Mr. Lillard, has been advised by Reed White, one of our investigators, as well as Agent Maven, that he is being charged with these 3 offenses. Sunday, we responded, roughly we got a call a little after 1 o'clock in the morning to respond to 115 Watson Reynolds Road in Baldwin County. The call had come in basically stating that they had had a drowning on the scene. We had people that had been in the water, been deceased. Our people responded. When our EMTs, when our deputies responded and everyone got to the scene, they determined that the scene looked a little inappropriate as far as just a pure drowning incident. Due to some blood at the scene and the demeanor of the people at the scene. Our deputies separated Mr. Heinl, the home property owner, from Mr. Lillard. Mr. Lillard was placed in a Baldwin County patrol car. Mr. Heinl went into his house. They were advised they were going to be separated and interviewed. When Heinl went back into his house, he was unattended, and he did commit suicide. He utilized a weapon in his house and killed himself. He was not in custody at the time, but we view this as a terrible incident. We're very sorry for his family. GBI responded, helped us with the case around 3:15. Tremendous rain, very dark out there. It's in a swimming pool area in front of a house on Watson Reynolds Road. We made the determination early on to wait until daylight before we truly worked the scene. We didn't think we could appropriately work the crime scene in that type weather, especially in the dark. Agent Brian Hargrove, crime scene specialist with the GBI regional office here in Milledgeville, came and he worked the scene. We probably spent close to 15 hours at the house and in interviews with Mr. Lillard. We had autopsy performed today at the Macon Crime Laboratory. The pending, well, they're not really pending, but the preliminary reports from the crime lab gave us cause of death on Ms. Shockley, strangulation. Very evident that the death of Mr. Heinl was self-inflicted gunshot wound. Lillard is going to be housed in the Baldwin County Jail. The question might be asked to us about concealing a death, because we came out there and the body was there when we responded. The concealing charge of the death occurs from Mr. Lillard making calls 2 hours prior to the 911 call, requesting people to help him, tell him how to get somebody back to life, how to help somebody do CPR, basically how to save a life. We can document this, that they waited over 2 hours before they contacted 911. That's the concealment charge. So any questions? I'm going to tell you, as usual, we take the approach when we work in cases like this. We work all of our cases, we work them together. GBI works with us. We all work it as teamwork. We had great response, not only from our initial deputies on the scene, but also with GBI in our patrol. So if you have any questions, we'll be more than glad to try to answer. I will tell you this, it's a very it's one of the strangest cases that we've ever worked. It was, I don't know how to explain this to people that are not in our business, but when we first arrived at the crime scene, there was something about it that was not right, and it was just sort of a bizarre, different kind of case. We had that conversation privately in our law enforcement circle.
What was your time frame, Sheriff, to the time of when Ms. Shockley was strangled?
We can't give an exact time on that for several reasons. One, from reports everybody there, they had a hot tub, they'd been in a hot tub. The temperature that we documented at the scene on the hot tub was 107 degrees. In the rain and with us being there at night, you could literally see steam coming up out of the hot tub. I'm going to tell you, had she been in the hot tub, which we can speculate, but we can't truly prove that, the heat in the hot tub, the time she was out, I think it would be very hard to make a determination of time. The closest thing we can come to a determination on time of death would probably be the telephone calls that we can document where they were calling, trying to get assistance and asking people how to help them get somebody back breathing.
Would that have been on Saturday night late, or would
This
that
would
have been
have been-
early Sunday morning?
We got our call early Sunday morning, but the telephone calls began in late Saturday night.
Do we know about how many calls were made?
I don't have that number.
It was basically a group text, and then we've got a couple other calls,
Yeah.
but probably around 11:30 that night, Saturday night. And 911 was not called until 1:06 a.m. the following day.
Yeah, and we do have group text, but we do have a specific phone call to someone that we think has medical training, that this person was asked clear questions about what I do. How'd I get somebody back to life? How'd I give them CPR?
Can you confirm that Ms. Shockley was in fact a professor at the University of Georgia?
We can't officially confirm that she's a professor with the University of Georgia other than through conversation with family and friends. But with our understanding of conversation through family and friends, she's a PhD entomologist with the University of Georgia. In fact, it is our understanding that she travels to South America and other places and does studies for the University of Georgia.
Clark Hingle was a doctor here in Milledgeville at the yoga place?
Mr. Heindel had been a clinical psychologist. He was, at this point in time, not licensed as a clinical psychologist. I think at one time he had taught some at Georgia College, and currently did own and operate the yoga studio on South Wayne Street in Milledgeville.
Can you comment on what kind of, you mentioned their demeanor was strange. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
I'm sorry,
Mr. Heindel and Mr. Willard.
Can the what now?
Their demeanor when officers arrived on the scene.
Well, I don't really know how to comment other than just, it wasn't appropriate CPR. It was just a different scene, and then the responding EMTs informed the deputies on the scene that they thought the body had been there longer than their timeline, and they documented that because of effects to the body.
And why was the doctor left alone during that questioning period? Why was he able to go inside by himself?
Well, at the time they got there, I wasn't there at the scene, but at the time, Lillard was the individual that brought the victim out there to the house. In fact, she rode in the car with him. They did come to Heindel's residence. I think due to the behavior at the scene, the totality of it, I think that is the reason that Lillard was detained in a vehicle and Heindel was separated. But to be real blunt with you, we're looking into that. It's a question for us also.
Your suspect is actually a former car salesman? in this area?
Yes, Mr. Lillard had been employed in the car business for several years here in, I want to say, not only in Milledgeville, but in the Macon area. And I don't know what he's currently doing at this time. I understand he's in the car business, but I can't document with who, for you.
He advised that he had recently quit his job last Friday, and he was a car salesman in Albany, Georgia.
And did he confess to this murder, or is this he hasn't confessed yet to this, or just been arrested?
We don't have a confession as such. We have an investigation that we work. We have autopsy reports. We have statements from other people involved. We can document the timeline was totally inappropriate of when we should have been called, when emergency medical personnel should have been called and when they were called. So it's just the totality of the entire investigation, and we have so far spent a lot of time on it.
And did Mr. Willard mention anything of an argument or a fight that happened between him and her, or just no kind of?
No, ma'am, we can't really get into the interviews with Mr. Lillard or other people, but I don't think that was mentioned. No.
Weren't they in the hot tub together, the suspect and Miss Shockley, and then your suspect then got out of the hot tub supposedly, according to your incident report on the investigation itself, went into the woods, stayed some 15 minutes, came back, which time he found Clark giving CPR to her, then he picks her up. Supposedly he's going to swim in this pool or whatever, and she drops out of his hand, so to speak, and supposedly that's how she hit her head, was on the pool of some sort.
Any incident report, any statement like that is purely the statements recorded by the responding deputy sheriff of what the person at the scene said at the time for initial documentation. From that point on, other than assistant investigations uniform was out of it, then we got into a complete investigation with other real interviews and crime scene tech work in trying to determine what happened and recovering evidence at the scene.
Can you tell us what room he shot himself in, the doctor? What room
Yeah,
he was?
it was in the bathroom of the house, master bathroom.
Do we know why he went back into the woods to get, I don't know what he went to get exactly, but do you know why he went back into the woods, or the reason?
No, ma'am, if I knew that, I'd be a root doctor. And I'd love to be able to know if he did go into the woods and why he went there.
Gotcha.
And at the time, like I said, when we first got to the scene, it was not only raining, but it was dark. You're in an area that, even though it's in front of a residence, is not well lit. And we truly had to wait until daylight to really work the scene to even see if that was plausible, what he told us.
And you said the doctor didn't have his license at the time of this incident?
It's our understanding that he is not a licensed clinical psychologist at this time.
And do we know why he doesn't have his license, or is that?
Um,
Gotcha.
There's an ongoing investigation?
Yes, I mean, when I say it's an ongoing investigation, this is they did the autopsy today, preliminary examination. I'm sure that we'll be waiting toxicology reports, and we'll sit back down again and review everything that we have. It's not a closed case. We're still getting some phone calls and information from people that may have some information. The families have been very open and very helpful in this investigation.
Can you share any information about how long Mr. Lillard had known either of the deceased?
It is our understanding, without true documentation, that he's known Clark Heindel for 3 or 4 years. We have really tried to find out how long he's known Miss Shockley. I think someone told us they've known each other for 3 or 4 months. Is that correct? Or am I that's just basically with that, we can't really document that at the time. But that's our understanding.
Thank y'all very much.
Good.